Today's video is sponsored by Dungeon Fog.
Be prepared for something powerful, something new. Behold the next level of map making. Paths! Morphing textures allow you to adjust your paths however you want them to go. Fully customizable settings and easy-to-use handling for fast and new ways to create maps. Manipulate path points and segments however you want and adjust the opacity. And make sure your stairwells always bend to your will. Conform each path however you decide, reshuffle the textures and bend them, twist them, and make them your own. Resize the textures, place objects above, below, as you normally do with props. This is everything you have ever wanted!
Check out www.dungeonfog.com/allthingsdnd to take map making to the next level. Use promo code allthingsdnd for a 10% discount on premium subscriptions. Now what you're here for. How having no backstory can lead to an epic story. The Iron Golems Part 2. Hi everyone, All Things D&D is back with another story. Welcome back to Part 2 of the Iron Golem Saga. Over the next few months, our party went on several adventures together and got to know each other better. We killed a giant with unreasonable toll bridge prices, scared off a winged devil called a Cambion who wouldn't tell me his name, slaughtered a coven of hags that killed Lottie, the party's pet kitten, and more. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Here is our party. Myself, the Horizon Walker Ranger, arcane trickster rogue named Sam. More open and loyal to friends, I spend each evening developing my friendship with them. But quietly, I am distrustful of our employer, Lord Chamberlain. My familiar is a junior Tressum named Lottie. It's short for Latifa, which in Infernal means gentle one. She doesn't like being left alone or unwatched. I managed to summon her back after the hags killed her, but there were scorch spots on her back. Only 001 knows what Lottie's name is short for. 001, the Warforged wild magic sorcerer with a damaged core. He has slowly been regaining his memories and has accepted Sam as his brother. While he still believes in the Golden Rule, he does reach out to those in need to help them. Ernest the Grand, the Tiefling Great Old One Warlock with the Pact of the Tome. Strong and earnest for both power and Cthulhu, but doesn't ever back down or away in a fight. He has been knocked unconscious more times than everyone else combined and tripled. Also, Ernest has been stepping up as the party face, negotiating better deals with those we come across. Fenric, the half-wood elf Oath of the Ancients paladin, listens to his hammer, which claims that every creature, not its wielder, is an evil that he must smite. Luckily, he holds himself back when it comes to his allies, civilians, and harmless animals. Sir Fancy Pants, fourth to his name, the human champion. A strong fighter, a stronger indolent, and the most prone to charms, mental attacks, and magical manipulation from enemies. A frequent visitor to the bar, he loves to brag about himself and conquer a new person every other night. I am technically still squired to him, but over time has done less for the self-proclaimed war hero. Seth, a human cleric Lord Chamberlain assigned to our group. At first he seemed reliable, if a bit of a downer. However, he has not only refused to use powerful spells in combat, but has even charged us for any spells he casts on our behalf or request. The Tiefling Druid Mazakeen and her protector Donner the Bronze Dragonborn Barbarian used to work alongside us. However, Donner said he had an annual event happening across the continent, and they left together. Over half a year has passed since I first met 001 the Amnesiac Warforged, and got squired to Sir Fancy Pants. During that time, the Lord Chamberlain went from directing a roving caravan to leading a fortified city. I kept an ear out in the city and among the guards. Apparently, Lord Chamberlain crossed the mountain ridge, most rumors believe alone, claiming to be the right-hand man of the king on the other side, and hired adventurers and guards to help bring order to this land. While his actions so far have been good, helping the locals get stable jobs and homes, his fascination with ancient relics and powerful magical objects kept myself and Fenric suspicious. While a couple flashes of memory have come back to 001 over the months, it wasn't until today, as we returned from a mission without Fenric and Ernest, that he had a big one. He believes he came from a place known as Miskatonic. When he reported this to the Lord Chamberlain, he told 001 that a ritual to repair his core and restore his memories had been prepared. However, I was nervous. If he regained his past life, would he forget he was my brother? While the ritual was being set up, I went to find the rest of our party. Ernest was on his own, and told me how Fenric's hammer's god, who calls itself Ilmater, is making him more and more bloodthirsty. I agreed, and wished that we had access to a library in the fortress. Ernest then revealed that he knew of a magic school called Miskatonic University, and had mental contact with a Professor Wilhelm who worked there. With this information, I knew we could find Miskatonic without 001 undergoing the ritual, and rush back. Bad news, I was too late to stop it. Good news, 001 retained all his memories of us. The ritual revealed a fragment of wild magic embedded in his core, which they isolated, but was impossible for them to remove. He also regained his memory of where Miskatonic was approximately located, and marked it on the War Room's map. The Lord Chamberlain wasn't sure he trusted us with such a mission, and wanted to send other adventurers into the mountain with 001. But I, while still unsure if he was fully trustworthy, didn't want to lose his favor. So I made an offer as a bid into his good graces. I asked for a notebook with the same magical mark found on our weapons. Should he so wish, the mark will teleport the book to his possession, with any and every note I write within. Lord Chamberlain apparently still didn't trust me, a member of his favorite group of adventurers, and asked me to place under another geese to guarantee my notes on my route are complete and truthful. I told him such a precaution wasn't necessary, and submitted to that geese. After weeks of relatively safe travel to and up the mountains, only finding an adventuring party of 4 tailing us, 001 recognized a cave as the entrance to Miskatonic. Inside was a magical barrier, which prevented teleportation-type magic within. Just beyond was a large trapezoidal chamber, which looked like a courtyard. Across from us, a sphinx rested atop the stairs, in anticipation of intruders. She looked down at 001. "Greetings, Master. I have guarded this place as per our agreement, and none have either entered nor escaped since you last passed through." 001 was honest with her, telling her how he lost most of his memory, and asked permission to pass. You speak the truth. You may pass, but only if you solve your own riddle. You have 3 chances to guess right before I eat all of you. If you attempt to leave after I give the riddle, you will not escape that fate." After we all agreed and stayed, the Sphinx began to sing, a wicked smile growing larger the further along she went. Across a flat plain run 4 rivers. One shines bright in a rough place. One buries the forgotten dead. One climbs through fields of clover. One for those without a head. 8 kings rule 4 kingdoms. 8 queens hold 4 courts. 22 servants attend them, and 4 others they did deport. What am I? Seth quickly responded, "Time. The answer is always time." The Sphinx laughed at him. "Not this time. First failure." And so, 001 and the others racked their brains trying to think of the solution, each working on a different line. While they did, I reached into the pack for the Lord Chamberlain's notebook to write the riddle down, and grabbed a little box instead. That item immediately made my head work overtime. "Guys, I think I figured it out." Sir Fancy Pants seemed surprised at this, but I pulled out my deck of cards, laying them out by suit. "Look, rivers are not only a poker term, but can also be called a straight. We have in the rough a diamond, a spade to bury the dead. The clubs look like clovers, and those without a head still have hearts." Sir Fancy Pants scoffed. "But there's only 4 kings in a deck, not 8. 001 answered him. "Not in one deck. How about 2? Ernest quickly spoke up. "Our second answer is 2 decks of cards." The Sphinx smiled sincerely and stepped aside. "You may pass freely." Through the entrance was a great building in ruins, buried under the surrounding mountain. There were broken statues of owls littered around the place. It could have been Miskatonic, but it seemed lost and abandoned for a millennia. Ernest managed to contact Professor Wilhelm again, who upon being told what Ernest saw started muttering incoherently. The last chamber held what looked like an ancient orrery, with mirrors instead of planets aligning around it towards a central pedestal. It was resting on an island in the middle of the room, the occasional dripping of water from above filling the circular pond. 001 spoke up. "I remember. I wanted to keep this hidden. Let me activate it." Ernest flew him up on his broom, avoiding the ring of water. 001 stood on the central pedestal and flipped the switch. As soon as he did, he got clamped in. Windows opened to let in sunlight. A magical aura gathered around the mirrors in the sunlight's path, and a beam shone directly at his core. But the humming drew the attention of a creature that slipped behind us. It was a large shifting pile of black tar, yellowed eyes and fanged mouths. A shoggoth. Seth rushed to hide behind the device, and cast Sanctuary on himself as a means of self-preservation. Ernest summoned Skeletor to fight it at close range, alongside Sir Fancy Pants, and the rest of us stayed clear of the aberration. Since I was exploring the back side of the room, I was separated from the party, which saved me from its poisonous breath. As the spray grew closer to Fenric, he shone, and Aura protecting himself and Ernest, but Sir Fancy Pants wasn't so lucky. Poison got into his eyes, making him miss half his attacks, and each hit released a spray of poison from the injury, hurting Sir Fancy Pants, while Skeletor shrugged it off. I didn't want to send in Lottie when it had such an attack, but Sir Fancy Pants was nearly blind, and we both wanted to help. So Lottie went over and used help on him. This made it easier for him to hit, but also created a spray of poison that bloodied him. So instead of attacking the creature using my planar energy and longbow, Laddie and I cast Cure Wounds on Sir Fancy Pants and yelled at him to fall back. Indignant that his squire would command him, Sir Fancy Pants struck the shoggoth with fervor, which divided it into two. One ran for 001, who was still stuck in the pedestal, the beam of magic pulling a long sliver out of his chest. The other struck Sir Fancy Pants, and he crumpled, Lottie flying out of reach as he did. Right before half the shoggoth reached 001, with me trying to block its advance, he was freed from the pedestal. He told me later that the machine removed the sliver of wild magic and restored his core. Grabbing that sliver like a wand, he cast Fireball, an aura shaped like cogs spinning behind him. With a single blast, both shoggoth were destroyed. From a secret compartment in the pedestal, a box popped out. As I used another Cure Wounds to heal Sir Fancy Pants, 001 opened it and pulled out a deck of 22 cards. Curious, Fenric reached out and drew one card. The item which 001 uncovered in the depths of Miskatonic's ruins was known as the Deck of Many Things. Fenric, curious about why half a deck of cards would be so valuable, wanted to see if the cards had gold leafing. He drew Throne, which caused his voice to become deeper and made the deed appear in his hands. Ernest, as ever, Ernest drew Knight. When Skeletor started to shake and crumble, Ernest was scared for him. Then he became overjoyed when the card engulfed Skeletor with its magic, making him a permanent party member. Sir Fancy Pants wanted to go next and drew Gem. A large bag of diamonds appeared in his hand, making him shout with excitement. At Ernest's encouragement, 001 drew a card and got Sun. Not only did he grow more powerful, but the necromantic orb he destroyed reformed in his hands. Ernest and Fenric then turned to me, but after fighting the shoggoth, preventing one of the split halves from attacking 001 and his repairment machine, I was still injured and nervous. Fenric then said, "I'll draw for you then," and proceeded to draw 2 cards. He got Rogue and Flames, giving him the distinct impression that a demon and another person were determined to kill him. Laughing at his companion, Ernest drew 2 as well. His first was Moon, giving him 3 wishes. The second was Talon, destroying all of his magical items, including the broom he was still riding on. He quickly used a wish to draw a different card, which did not replace his current draw. Hearing his wish, and confirming he had at least one more, I drew Talon, confident that he could use a wish to, and I quote, draw a different card, instead of the one he just did. As my magical items vanished, Ernest heard Professor Wilhelm scream in pain, and wished for him to be alright. This caused the ring on my hand to transfer to his. Sir Wilhelm's soul was inside it. Sir Fancy Pants guffawed at our mixed fortune, and drew Don John, causing him to vanish. Seeing this, 001's eyes flashed, and he put the deck away. Later when we were alone, he would confide in me about his newfound memories. While faces and names were still missing, he was part of another adventuring party before us, who all fell to the deck. Their rogue drew Gem and Void, causing him to disappear like Sir Fancy Pants after receiving gold. Fighter died fighting a Grim Reaper, which the Skull card summoned. Warlock drew Throne and Sun like we did, and both Warlock and Sorcerer drew Balance, which seemed to flip and twist their personalities. Seeing his party falling apart, 001 used the Vizier card to ask how he could fix his party. He was guided to steal the deck and the orb from them, hide them, and use the machine to merge the wild magic shard with his core. As a way to show thanks and understanding, I confided in him my final secret. After giving Sir Fancy Pants eulogies of mixed feelings in a funeral, we were reduced to myself, the Horizon Walker Ranger, arcane trickster rogue named Sam. I'm slowly gaining confidence in myself, and spend each evening developing my friendship with my allies. My familiar is a junior Tressum named Latifa, which in Infernal means Gentle One, who doesn't like being left alone or unwatched. 001, the Warforged Clockwork Soul Sorcerer. Restored by the device in Miskatonic, he remembers most of his past life, and how he was dedicated to hiding dangerous artifacts, much like Lord Chamberlain claims to do with his vault. Ernest the Grand, the Tiefling Great Old One Warlock, with the Pact of the Tome. Starting to learn the advantage of spacing, Ernest is fighting more like me and supporting the party. Fenric, the half-wood elf Oath of the Ancients Paladin, listens to his hammer, which claims that every creature not its wielder is an evil that he must smite. And finally, Seth, a human cleric Lord Chamberlain assigned to our group. At first he seemed reliable if a bit of a downer. However, he has not only retreated from combat, but has even charged us for any spells he casts on our behalf or request. After returning to Lord Chamberlain, he saw our loss in numbers and found a replacement fighter, a pun-loving dwarven monk named Hingle McCringleberry. With his bagpipes of haunting, he reminded me of Sir Fancy Pants, but less self-indulgent. We turned in the necromancy orb, and in return got improved weapons and armor, including those Ernest and myself lost. He also asked to see 001's wild magic shard, to see if they could analyze and replicate it. 001 lent it to him. In return, he loaned us a fancy bottle with a large stopper. We didn't dare open it. The next day, Lord Chamberlain called all of us, not including Fenric, into his office. Recently, another force has been making moves in this region, taking slaves and hiring the more brutal and monstrous fighters. I froze when we were commanded to either forge an alliance with or kill the leader of the Colosseum. I bought better armor and a shield, as well as a bag of holding, afraid of what would happen. I also confided my fears in 001, since I wasn't sure I would make it out unscathed. A couple cities away from the Colosseum, wanted posters started cropping up. One was for a large green orc wielding a stone-jutted club. The other showed a winged demon with bloody holes where horns should be and sharp fangs. Ernest saw their bounties and wanted to hunt them down for extra cash. However, 001 and Hingle convinced him to deal with the Colosseum first. Outside the Colosseum walls, we found two tribes of orcs laying siege. They were the unified tribe under Garrosh. While I wanted to make amends, I knew only force could repay our betrayal. So while everybody they didn't see that day went through the orc checkpoint, I borrowed Ernest's replacement broom, cast invisibility, and crossed undetected. After meeting up with the party at an inn near the gate, I told them I would go scouting while I was still invisible. I found out the guards on the wall were somewhat lax, due to their faith in their warlock leader Melgorn. But around the Colosseum proper, more alert and stronger guards were patrolling. As I walked into the cheap inn, after walking past a few drunken men, I joined my party's discussion. According to the barkeep, the only way to get an audience with leader Melgorn is to win a weekly tournament in the Colosseum. I heavily argued against this. The regular gladiators were tough and received special treatment. However, there are a ton of monsters and slaves that also serve as entertainment. To them, the healers only did the bare minimum to keep them fighting, and sometimes they would be put on display for people to pay for throwing stones. This was not a place for even the average fighter. If it wasn't for my friendship with Garrosh, I would have recommended killing him and using his head as a bargaining chip to even get close to Lord Melgorn instead. But my warnings were ignored, and we signed up for a tournament under the team name the Iron Golems. The first round was brutal. We faced 3 Arinyas, or female winged demons, and 2 imps. I managed to injure one badly, but that drew their ire and attention. While my shield kept me alive, I barely survived their onslaught when they took to the sky with their bows. Hingle the dwarf took a running leap, 15 feet into the air, and managed to grapple one into the ground, and I ran behind 001 for some cover. Seeing my bloody figure, 001 said, "Want to be a T-Rex?" and cast a twin polymorph on myself and Ernest. At that moment, Fenric appeared next to 001, with Lord Chamberlain's test for a new teleportation crystal successful. Seeing the 3 Arinyas, one grappled by Hingle and within his reach, he killed it with a divine smite. Encouraged by this, Hingle tried to drag down another for myself, as a T-Rex and Fenric to defeat, as Ernest charged for the other, taking out an imp with his tail as he ran. However, before we could, Ernest and I reverted from being T-Rexes. They had targeted 001 and knocked him out. Seth left his sanctuary to cast a group healing spell, reviving him and making myself barely bloodied, for a price of 200 gold. And then he immediately ran back into the corner and cast Sanctuary. When the fight was done with me finishing off the Arinya, who was gloating over Fenric's fallen body, Melgorn stood up in his box and congratulated us. He then announced his new partnership. An adult white dragon would destroy the orcs, starting that day. As much as I wanted to rush out and help Garrosh, I knew it would be hard for him to accept us back, not without proof of loyalty. After a rest, with us listening to the flapping and roaring of the dragon, we were invited into Melgorn's private office, something we were hoping to earn through the full tournament. The room itself was clean and excessively adorned. 2 Arinyas guarded the door, and the chained one was leaning in a corner, wordlessly watching us, his face hidden by his hood, and chains wrapped all over his body. 001 and myself were nervous in this company. I was wary because Melgorn might recognize me, and it turns out 001 was cautious for the same reason. As Melgorn glared at me in my mask, even calling in his guards when I refused to remove it, 001 took a risk and removed his hood. Melgorn focused on him immediately. It turns out 001, whose real name is Duke, was a former member of Melgorn's adventuring party. Melgorn was the warlock from Duke's memories, and his brother was the fighter. He wanted the Orb of Necromancy in an attempt to trade it to death in return for his brother. After we told him Lord Chamberlain's proposition, and let slip that he had scryed the orb, Melgorn became paranoid. He muttered about how only the deck could find the orb, and how he must have it. The orb, or Orb of Power, was able to attune itself to any form of magic, so long as a great relic was sacrificed, and a sample of the magic was present. Turning back to us, he offered a deal. To prove our strength, One of us would have to fight the chained one to the death. Then, should we impress him, we would be placed under a geese to help him instead of Lorne Chamberlain. Only then would he consider an alliance. Ernest, Fenric, and Hingle were arguing amongst themselves about who would accept the fight. However, I knew how the chained one fought. He was the one that broke me my first week as a slave. And Melgorn was eyeing up Duke still, alternating his mutterings between the deck and how 001 should be the one to fight. My brotherly love trumped my fear, so I pulled off my glove and threw it down at the chained one's feet. He silently looked at me for a few seconds, then slowly picked up the glove, tossing it back only after Melgorn recognized the accepted challenge. That night was a haunting one. I'm not sure if it was my own fears personified or a dream master. Either way, the DM was saying discouraging words. Things like, "This will be an incredibly difficult fight. He's going to be tough. You are level 9, and he was CR8 before doubling its HP and giving it more boosts. I doubt you will survive." So the next morning before entering the ring with my old foe, I turned to my party and asked if there were any spells they could cast to help me through the fight. Most said no, since they last less than a minute, and the fight would start later than that. Seth reminded us how the fight was an official duel, and was afraid Melgorn could detect interference. But Duke was willing to risk it, and cast both Aid at 5th level, his maximum spell level, and Protection from Evil and Good, which lasts 10 minutes. I gave him my bag of holding, pulling out all the equipment I need for the fight, and went down a separate hallway. While they watched from Melgorn's private box, flanked by wizards, I walked into the arena opposite the chained one. With the clap of several hands from each corner of the arena, a familiar arena of force, made up of 4 25-foot walls, 10 foot high, and covered by a 5-foot dome, sprung up around us. As with the last time I faced him, the chained one threw down 4 sets of 10-foot chains, a duelist's offering of weapons. But I remembered how those chains obeyed his commands, and didn't take any. And if I wanted to survive, I needed every advantage I could give myself, even if it meant losing the trust of my party. Before he could strike at me, I cast invisibility, and dropped my cloak and mask as I moved behind him. As he lashed out blindly with his remaining chains, he missed me entirely. I then downed my potion of speed, and cast Zephyr Strike. As I returned into view, blurring towards the chained one's back with 4 times my regular speed, I heard Fenric and Ernest shout in surprise before the audience could. No doubt their minds were going over every little detail of my past, every clue to what I truly was. I guess Hingle didn't know me long enough to care, and I already told Duke in the hopes that he would help the others accept me. They watched as I dived down to strike the chained one, flapping my wings, my red eyes glaring at him. As I pulled up into a corner of the shrunken arena, I glimpsed Melgorn muttering under his breath. He recognized me as the runaway winged tiefling, whose wanted posters were put up alongside those for Garrosh. From this point on, the fight became more and more exhilarating. This menacing figure of my nightmares, who tore off my tail and horns, was surprisingly easy. Every time he attacked, he would lash out 3 times with his chains. Through telepathy, Ernest told me the chained one was cheating. A wizard back in the tunnel was casting haste on the chained one, but despite that I was able to dodge most of his chains, and the few that nicked me I was able to pull off before he yanked me to the ground. Turn after turn I would strike him with a booming blade, amplified by that ethereal planar energy, with little Lottie helping distract the chained one. He would try to lash me as I passed, but the lingering boost in my reflexes from Zephyr Strike helped me evade his counter-strike. A few times I saw flashes of my mom appear, but any other effect failed as Duke's spell protected me. Within 30 seconds of my reappearance, the fight was over before I was even bloodied. The chained one was growing more erratic with each slash, and made the mistake of pulling me down while I was directly above him. This knocked him prone, and I used that opening to decapitate him. With his demonic head and a dangling chain in one hand, I stood up to a crowd stunned into silent murmurs. I presented the head to Melgorn. "Is this your champion?" Slightly irked but hiding it well, Melgorn stood up and smiled at me.
"Young man, what is your name?"
"I am Samir Murlison, of a small fishing village." I saw Ernest's eyes widen at the name, and he began whispering to every ally in the booth. As a fellow tiefling who spoke Infernal, he knew what Samir translated to, a friend for evening talks. Melgorn then gestured to the crowd.
"Ladies and gentlemen, we have a new champion, Samir Swiftblade."
As I recovered myself in the underground hallway, realizing that I defeated my longtime nightmare with ease, I laughed in relief. Latifah settled into my lap, knowing that I was more at peace than ever before. Then my party arrived, surprisingly calm about everything that happened. Duke told me that Fenric was upset at the deception, but he calmed him down. Together we walked to Melgorn's office and attacked. Fenric wanted the final strike, but I convinced him Garrosh should deal with him. So he slid him into my bag of holding, briskly walked out of the Colosseum and city, and made our way to the Orc camp. Garrosh was in the main tent, and looked coldly at us as we entered.
"Give me one good reason to let you live,"
he growled in Orcish. "I'll give you 2 reasons," I replied in Common. pulling out the chain one's head and 2 of the 3 chains I picked up. Garrosh was surprised at this.
Did you kill him?
Yes, in a cage match. Can you clear this table? I slid Melgorn's prone body still alive in front of Garrosh. He stared at his hated enemy.
Melgorn is mine, and so too will his city.
We worked together to make a plan to re-enter the Colosseum and defeat the dragon. Garrosh wanted to face it in the open, using a ballista installed near the front line. However, Duke told us of a spell, Wall of Force, which he could use to trap it inside the Colosseum. We went with Duke's plan, after destroying the gates for the orcs to storm through. As my allies hid around the Colosseum, I dismissed Lottie and used disguise self to appear as Garrosh. I tried to call the adult white dragon down to talk face to face, with me in Garrosh's box, and him inside the arena. It didn't work. I then tried to claim it failed to keep its duty. The dragon responded,
I have upheld my end of the bargain between you and Tiamat. If you won't, then I will kill you.
Knowing it was too smart, I then switched voices and said, Good thing I already killed Melgorn. I quickly dropped my disguise, cast invisibility, and dashed into the arena for the opposite tunnel. With a roar of anger, the dragon followed me, with a blast of icy breath I barely avoided. As soon as the dragon descended low enough, Duke cast Wall of Force, making a checkerboard of barricades the dragon couldn't slip between. The party then leapt into action. Some stayed in the stands and cast spells, some ran out of the other tunnel, and Hingle McCringleberry would try and ride the dragon, grappling its neck and pummeling it. Whenever Hingle fell off, he would leap back on, his Eldritch Claw tattoo extending his reach by 15 feet. After several rounds of combat, the dragon noticed Duke hiding in the stands and sent over a blast of ice. This was enough for Duke to lose concentration, and it began to fly away, low over the city.
Tiamat will have her vengeance on you yet.
Oh no, you don't! Hingle gained a sudden burst of speed, moving from the stands where he was thrown off to the top of the arena. He leapt after the dragon, using his extended reach to grab the dragon's neck again. He swung himself up and dropped into an axe kick. With a fading roar and dimming eyes, the dragon died, crashing headfirst into the ground. Several orcs in the middle of destroying nearby buildings saw this happen and cheered for Hingle the Dragon Piledriver. After the city was destroyed and the slaves freed, Garrosh held a feast in our honor, and to celebrate their victory over their war chief's sworn enemy. After hearing our part, he granted us a boon, or any favor in the future, and gave me an orcish name to recognize my place in his tribe.
I name you Hidden Snake. While you do not have the strength of an orc, your ability to sneak in plain sight, and your speed when you strike, rivals even the best of my guard.
We were happy that day, despite the destruction of an entire city. None of us wondered what we would call on the orc tribe's help for. But that is a tale for another time. Stay tuned for the final installment of the Iron Golem saga. Please let us know what you think and comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, All Things D&D. Our videos are posted every 5 days, so stay tuned for more amazing Dungeons & Dragons content.